Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That is my co-host Tyson Gentry. We got some hardball to talk about today, Tyson, or should I say some hard court to talk about? Post All-Star break. I don't even know what to call it anymore, man. They've been off for a week. It feels like. Jeez.
Well, the players are playing hardball because nobody wants to play anymore. But we'll talk about that too. Yeah, man, we haven't done many NBA shows, but leaning more into college basketball, NBA, and PGA Tour basically now that the NFL is wrapped up, and just it's a weird year in the NBA, dude.
It is. And we have a lot to discuss about, especially coming out of the trade deadline. There was a lot of things going on there. This was during our little hiatus. So we'll touch on a few of the moves, obviously the big ones, and how it pertains to the gambling markets. So that'll be like a big discussion about the NBA post All-Star break. And then we'll move into money making time and give out some early picks we like tomorrow in both the NBA and college basketball. But a lot of movement, as we just mentioned. Kevin Durant going to the Suns. Russell Westbrook traded, then signed by the Clippers. That was an interesting move to me. Lakers doing a little rebuild of their roster in season. So how does that look, Tyson? Let's pull everything up here. Here are the odds as we sit. So the Boston Celtics are the favorite. They didn't have a very active trade deadline. You know, they're the best team in the NBA record-wise. The Bucks plus 440 are the second favorites. They got Jay Crowder. That was like their big move. And then the Suns, as we mentioned, got Kevin Durant. So let's start here. I mean, the Suns we discussed on the previous NBA one, you know, you weren't too sold on them. This is your team. And now they get Durant, kind of the biggest piece on the chessboard. Where are you at regarding your Phoenix Suns?
I think if you're looking at this from a futures market, like plus 450 it's pretty short, man, to be honest with you, because we haven't seen it on the court yet. We're not going to know apparently until a week from today. It doesn't look like Kevin Durant's playing until next Wednesday to see how this thing fits together. And then the skeptical side of me as a Suns fan is like DeAndre Ayton still has to give a shit every night for this team to be really good. They didn't lose as much depth, I think, as people were talking about. Like Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, that stinks. Two of your better point of attack defenders, two of your better shooters, spacers, all that kind of stuff. But like Jay Crowder hadn't played a game for the team all season, so to act like losing him off the bench is something insane. We have to see how Terrence Ross fits in and how Monty Williams is going to manage this team's minutes, because to me, as a Suns fan, I guess I have a little bit more insight into this than I do with some of these other teams, but the rotations in Phoenix can be a little bit bipolar, and it takes Monty Williams a minute to figure them out. But once he figures it out, Monty Williams sticks to his rotation, and that's pretty much what you're going to get from the Suns night in and night out, whether guys are playing good or bad. And so I want to see the minutes distribution, and I want to see how much tread and how much run they're going to put on Chris Paul going forward into the playoffs here, because if he has another disappearing act, this team's probably not good enough. They might be good enough to get out of the West with Booker and Kevin Durant and Ayton, but I don't think they're better than the Celtics, the Bucks, and I honestly think that the Clippers are a pretty tough matchup for them as well.
Well, here's how I view the Suns, because the question marks are going to be regarding Chris Paul. But I think the nice thing about it is now is that his usage rate, at least what he has to do to score the ball, which is where he gets worn out and which is what makes him use all of his energy. He doesn't have to do that anymore. Like, he doesn't have to be this third fiddle. And we know DeAndre Ayton's not polished on offense. Like, he's not a very good offensive player. At least he has the skill set. He doesn't show up on a nightly basis like these other big men, like Embiid, like a Jokic, who are extremely polished on the offensive end. But now DeAndre Ayton's their third scorer. Like, he really doesn't have to be an electric scorer out there. He just has to rebound. He just has to defend. And that's the other thing I think you're pointing to as well. Is he going to be bought into that role? I think when it comes to a championship, he might be. But I think adding Kevin Durant, obviously you're going to get better. But I think what it does for the rest of that roster, it elevates what their weaknesses were, or it mitigates what their weaknesses were. You don't need Chris Paul to go out and get you buckets anymore. Just pass the rock. Okay, DeAndre Ayton was our second weapon on the offense. You don't need to do that anymore. We have Booker and KD. This is, to me, the Suns are the favorite. I think they're a better team when they figure this out than the Celtics. They just have too much firepower for me at plus 450. I'd be looking at the Suns here, but like you said, I want to see how it looks.
And the flip side of Phoenix, real fast before we get off of them, is everybody's talking about, and this is something that's maybe a little bit in the weeds, but it bugs me when people talk about this in the NBA. like as if the depth isn't good enough to win a title. But when you go get somebody like Kevin Durant, that elevates the pressure. And a lot of these guys, you basically have to rise to the occasion at that point. It sends a sense of urgency throughout the entire franchise. You can put Kevon Looney on the Wizards for the last 6 years, and he's not going, he's going to put up the same numbers he did on the Dubs. Basically, you can point to role players all throughout. Matthew Dellavedova was out of the league 2 years basically after that improbable performance in the finals. There's guys like that on every team that win. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, guys like that get there, and you're like, oh shit, we got to win. You want to play. And so I'm not as worried about the Ish Wainwrights of the world as everybody else seems to be.
And last point too as well. I heard the depth. Oh, Suns have no bench now. It's like, I don't know if that's true. I think Terrence Ross is actually going to be a great piece for them that you mentioned. And then once Campaign gets healthy, I don't see the depth being an issue at all. Like, this is not a Brooklyn Nets situation. Like, there's legit dudes on that bench who have played minutes. Like Jack Landale. Like, he's a good backup. They already have Bismack Biyombo as well. I think losing Saric, that hurts a bit, but I don't think this is one of the weaker benches in the NBA, like people are trying to suggest.
It's a good shooting bench too. I think that's a pretty big deal.
Let's move into the Bucks, and they, like we said, Jay Crowder was mainly the one piece they felt they were missing, and that's who they wanted to go after, and they landed him. Adds toughness, adds shooting, adds an ability to stretch the floor and versatile being versatile on defense. Here's the question mark I have. How hurt is Giannis' wrist? He's a freak. He has improved his shooting recently, and that's completely changed how teams have to guard Giannis. Like, he can actually step back and hit a three now. If he can't shoot and he turns back into that old school Giannis where he just has to go downhill, I think there's a blueprint on how to beat this Bucks team. What do you think about that?
I mean, we all know about the wall, right? That's how you beat Giannis, basically. When he's in that mode, you just build a wall in the paint and dare him. The Boston Celtics are pretty well equipped with length and athletes if that's the way that Giannis has to play. I think they probably get through the Sixers without Giannis being able to shoot. And I know that hurts you as a Sixers fan, but nobody else in the East is really scary. Like, you're not worried about the Miami Heat if you're the Bucks. You're not worried about the Hawks or the Knicks or whoever. So it's kind of coming down to a 3-team race there. I think kind of the most underrated part with Milwaukee to me to this point in the year is, like, Brook Lopez looks like Brook Lopez, which is like a pretty huge boon for them at times. Sometimes you're like, oh yeah, his back doesn't work and this guy can't play anymore. But when he has it working, like, this team is so good on defense and they're still frustratingly stagnant at times on offense, but it's kind of by design. That's just how they like to run certain possessions. But when they get after people, man, they're so good. I think that I got to be able to know. It sucks. We're doing this features episode, and I don't have conviction on a lot of these guys. But if Giannis can't shoot, like, I think that's probably a wrap on the Milwaukee Bucks, which is a total bummer because this is, to me, this is like the next evolution of Giannis was what we were watching to this point of the year, and nobody else was paying attention. So now that it's post NFL season, it's going to be like, this guy still can't shoot.
Right. And meanwhile, he's gonna have his wrist taped up when he actually does play. But I'm going back to what you said about not having conviction. I think that's the thing about after the trade deadline and All-Star break. We haven't seen these teams piece together. Like, the only thing we know is what the Suns were before they got Durant, what the Bucks were before the Giannis injury, what the Clippers were before Russell Westbrook trade, and the additions that they've made. Other than that, we don't really have a sample size. So I don't even know if he really, unless you're kind of feigning conviction, or at least you just have an inner confidence. Like I do with the Suns. Like, I just believe it's going to work out because I think Kevin Durant's just that good and Chris Paul is easy to play with. Like, that's pretty simple basketball kind of predictions to understand. But I don't know if they can beat the Clippers. And let's get into it, because you said that's a difficult matchup for the Suns. So the Clippers really remade their roster in the season. So they got Bones Highland from the Nuggets. So he's going to be the electric scorer off the bench that it feels like the Clippers have always had, either Jamal Crawford or Lou Williams. They traded for Mason Plumlee to back up Ivica Zubac. Eric Gordon came over from the Rockets, so another guy who can stretch the floor and shoot. And then now the big news is they signed Russell Westbrook. So how does that look now? We know Westbrook's not an efficient player anymore. We're not quite sure how he fits in this team. But I see a lot of people kind of shitting on this trade or the signing for the Clippers, saying, "Oh, they got worse. They got worse with Russ." I don't think that's true, because here's my thing about it, Tyson. What have we always complained about the Clippers since the iteration of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard era? They just kind of are lackadaisical and don't try on nights. You know what Russ does? Even for all his flaws, he actually gives a shit. And I think the Clippers need a little bit of that. And if he goes out and he's shooting up bricks, first of all, if the Clippers allow him, I'm talking coaching staff and players, to let him shoot the ball 20 times, that's on them. Yep. Because he should not be shooting the ball 20 times, maybe 10 times max, but just go out there and be energy and effort. That's what the Clippers need.
I also think that people weren't paying attention to how bad Reggie Jackson and John Wall were this year. Like, they didn't have a reliable, and not that Russell Westbrook is going to be that reliable ball handler and secondary creator kind of off of Paul George and third on the nights that Kawhi chooses that he wants to play. It's an upgrade, dude. Like, point blank period. He's not been good this season, but he's been better than Reggie Jackson. And that's what they're looking for. And they don't have to overhaul the entire offense. Russ has played with Paul George. I think everybody that's ever played with Kawhi Leonard has figured out how to play with Kawhi Leonard pretty quick. Like, truly, he seems like not the toughest guy to play with. I'm a little bit worried how Doc is going to manage minutes, and that's just kind of, or geez Louise, dude.
You're thinking about Sixers.
Ty Lue. Oh no, it's been.
I do a 1-for-1 trade as a Sixers fan. Give me Ty Lue.
I think everybody in the world would, but I'm a little bit worried about how Ty Lue is going to manage the minutes. I think he's going to love Russell Westbrook. Ty Lue is a great coach. Ty Lue can occasionally fall in love with players and leave them on the court a little bit too long. I think he's going to love having Russell Westbrook on his team. I'm not super, like, that's not scaring me off of LA, but as a whole, like in the West, when you look through it, I think 1 through 8, this is probably the most talented group. Like, Phoenix might have a little bit more high-end power now that they got Kevin Durant, but the Clippers are good all the way down through. Like, their second unit can play. And now that they have Russell Westbrook to kind of lead that charge, that's going to be really interesting to have to deal with. Plus, like, on the nights they want to play defense, good luck.
I think Russ is going to start. I think it's going to be Westbrook,
dude,
Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Morris, and Zubats. And I like that better with that bench unit. I think the bench unit is sick. With Highland, Gordon, Norman Powell, and Mason Plumlee. With their 4 games they played together when they were right before the All-Star break, that was a good bench unit. And I haven't seen that from a Clippers team in a long time. And I was like, man, oh man, this is a unit that legitimately can give minutes. You want to talk about resting Leonard and George? Shit, you can rest them during the game sometimes because they're not a minus. Like, those dudes can get buckets.
Yeah, I think that people don't really understand how good Bones Highland is on the offensive end of the ball. Like, he's beefing with Jamal Murray, and that kind of became the story at the trade deadline. And it wasn't like, oh shit, the Clippers just got one of the best 6-men in the league, and like, he could very well be the next 6-man legend. It's a lot of big personalities though in that locker room, and Ty Lue's been good at managing those in the past. It's just like, we're saying we're not worried about Russell Westbrook, but if he shows up and refuses to accept a different role, kind of the way that he's done most of the places he's shown up since OKC, then the Clippers are probably sunk. At a certain point, this dude has to like look around, and I don't mean this to be Russell Westbrook slander, but he gets so upset when everybody's hating on him, and he refuses to listen to anything that they're saying, and he almost leans more into like, I'm Mr. Triple Double, and that just drives his production down. Like, I think end of the year Carmelo Anthony humble pie is in order, and if he takes it, like, I think they win the championship.
And Clippers plus 1,100 to win the championship. If you like that, they're a preseason bet for me. I got them at plus 700, so not too much CLV there, but hey, whatever. Okay, so we touched on the Celtics a bit, plus 280. Now, they didn't go out and do anything, and we can touch on them shortly here. Do you still believe that they are the best team in the NBA?
The Celtics, yeah. I just like, what changed really? Like, the Suns 1 through 5 maybe, but I don't know. I mean, Jason Tatum's still coming down, taking the shot at the end of the game.
I'm curious to see how things change in the playoffs this season for them, because they were rolling through the East and they had that little bit of a blip. Not a blip really, because it was a tough tough series against the Heat. But I mean, they got punked against the Warriors, man. Like they
Yeah.
did not look good. And so I'm curious if there's a different mentality, if they have a secondary pitch that they can throw out if things get a little funky. But I mean, getting Malcolm Brogdon, that went under the radar. I think that's been a great addition for him. He very well may win Sixth Man of the Year this season. He's been awesome. Derek White coming over from the Spurs. That I think that's very good for their bench. Someone who can control the tempo. The Celtics are awesome, man. But plus 280, the favorites. That seems way too short for me. I'm not sure if fully healthy they can beat the Bucks. I think fully healthy, I might even take the Bucks over them in a series, especially with this addition of Crowder and how Grayson Allen and Connaughton have both figured out their roles on the wing.
I agree. Plus, how much is it going to change at the end of the year when they're still sitting with the best record in the NBA before the playoffs? Like they're going into this thing at plus 240. Like you're going to lose 40 cents by waiting a month and a half.
Now the Nuggets were the best team in the West. Still, they have the best record in the West. But everybody kind of thought it was still wide open. I think it's because the Nuggets haven't done much in the playoffs. They're sitting at plus 750 to win the championship. They got rid of Highland. Is it addition by subtraction? We'll see there. Other than that, though, I mean, not a huge roster makeup for the Nuggets. It seems like they're just kind of rolling it out there and seeing what they can do with the MVP and Nikola Jokic.
On the one hand, it's like you have the best record in the West. Why would you go out and try to remake the entire thing? But on the other hand, it's like this team can't really play on the road. It feels a little bit like we've seen this movie before. Not with the regular season this team's having, but I think people are a little bit scared off. And honestly, it's because they came back and beat the Clippers in the bubble. Like if they just lose that series and then have this kind of natural progression, people would be way more on the Denver Nuggets. But it feels like they blow or they choke in the playoffs, right? That's kind of the narrative. It's like, well, Jokic doesn't win the playoffs. Rarely have the Nuggets walked into a playoff series as the better team. Just truthfully. And you can say maybe they had a higher seed or a better record, but when it comes down to it in the NBA, like you have to have that second guy, and they haven't had one for 2 years. So I think letting those guys play together is going to be good. It's just like when the Mavericks go out and get Kyrie and the Suns go out and get Kevin Durant, Golden State's still lurking. Like you just, as a Nuggets fan, you would have liked to see something.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jamal Murray finally getting healthy. He started to play a lot better right before the All-Star break, and that's going to be a huge addition for them. They need him to be that guy, and then Michael Porter Jr. can be that third option. They're in kind of the midway point here. Sixers plus 1,300. They added Jaden McDaniels. That's really all they did at the break. They traded Matisse Thybulle. They wanted to get some more frontline size. Tyrese Maxey healthy. Finally, the Mavericks, we did a short piece on if we think Kyrie Irving is going to actually work out for the Mavs. They're at plus 1,700. And then the Warriors also at plus 1,700. Now, Steph Curry is getting relooked at, will be evaluated another week. I don't know how long he's going to miss because this team, with Jordan Poole running the show, it's just not the same. He's become a little bit more inefficient. Obviously, when you have Steph Curry and Klay Thompson that the defense have to worry about, you're going to be able to cook a little bit if you're Jordan Poole. And without the best shooter of all time on the floor, there's a lot more attention to you. But let's just touch on those three teams quick, Tyson. I mean, Sixers, this feels like for once they're under the radar. Mavs feel splashy with the Irving move. Like we're going to want to see if that works. And like you said, Golden State's lurking. Is there any potential any of those three teams can legitimately make a run at this thing?
I mean, I don't love any of them. I think Dallas, they were plus 2,200 the night of the Kyrie trade, I think. So that's gone down significantly as people have kind of taken notice of what's going on. I'm still a little bit more curious. I want to see more time because, like, if you did this off of him and Kevin Durant's first handful of games together in Brooklyn, you would have been burned. If you did this off of his first half season in Boston, you would have been burned. The guy's got to make it through more games without putting his foot in his mouth or disappearing or whatever for me to put my money on it. And then for the Sixers, dude, the reason they're under the radar is because Embiid's not fun anymore.
He's dominant though still.
I'm serious, but like he's not doing the JoJo stuff on Twitter and acting. He's not eating the burgers before the games on TV and watching anime and all that stuff that people love. He's just showing up and it's 28-12. Like it seems boring now. But I think that Embiid is in a unique situation because it's not going to be his fault if they don't win. in the national media narrative. It's going to be Harden couldn't get it done again. Like this coaching staff choked again.
Yep.
And so I think that's almost an advantage for him to be able to put his head down and work. Because if he wins, the credit's all his, and if they lose, it's not his fault. I am starting to get a little worried though, because it wasn't his fault when the Ben Simmons thing didn't work out, and if it's not his fault when this thing doesn't work out, then at what point do we just decide Joel Embiid's not it? He can't be the one on a championship team.
I think there are some questions being asked about that. The game's changed.
I think he can.
Right? You do. You're a big Joel Embiid guy, and so am I. Just the way the game's played now, it's hard for centers to dominate like he did when you had a Shaq, when you had an Olajuwon. I think that's what the Sixers have been trying to figure out. Daryl Morey out there running the basketball operations. How can you build the team around a center when everything is so ball dominant, whether it's a wing player or a guard? They thought it was James Harden. We'll see. He hasn't had that playoff success, so that's something to monitor, especially in Philadelphia. But I mean, they're under the radar for once. It's very interesting. Then let's talk about a couple teams here, Tyson, before we wrap things up and get into money making time. Grizzlies plus 1,800. If you listen to our last podcast, we didn't believe in them at all. We don't think they have a chance in the West. The Cleveland Cavaliers to win the championship plus 2,900. Now, we like them as our dark horse in the East, so we gave that out in the East. I'll get your thoughts on them if you think they can win the championship. If they do get through the gauntlet of the East, they would have to go through. Now, Lakers and Heat both sitting at plus 5,500. We'll see if the Lakers, their little makeover, if that does anything, and the Heat does feel like they've underperformed. Let's start with those teams, and then we can maybe finish McMillan and what the Hawks are sitting at now.
Gotcha. Yeah, on the Grizz, man, I'm not into it. I don't care. Like, I don't get it. I don't get what everyone else sees. On the Cavaliers, I think they were plus 31 when we did the preview show last time. So it's gone down a little bit. That's going to be a ticket that if you hold, you're hoping for a really cash out option, or you can sell that thing to somebody or something. Because if they win a couple rounds in the playoffs, they're not going to win the whole thing probably, but playoff Donovan Mitchell is a scary person. The Lakers won't improve until the top guys care. And that's just point blank period. Doesn't matter who's on the team. And I'm as big of a LeBron guy as it gets. But when you can tell watching him that he doesn't care about moving off the ball or playing defense. And Anthony Davis doesn't either. It's like, how are you supposed to expect all these other guys to kind of tap in and carry the load when they suck? Like they're not good. And then to Miami, the window's closed. Like I think it was tiny open in the bubble. Obviously, they made it all the way to the finals. Perfect storm. They had the perfect guy to play in the bubble. They had a really young team who was following Jimmy and kind of that grind mindset, and we're going to get through everybody. Kyle Lowry, that didn't work. So now it's just like a worse version of the Heat from the last couple of years that couldn't get it done. I don't see how this is different.
And the Heat added Kevin Love in a buyout. Kevin Love's obviously an older player. I think he'll add value there, but not enough to push them to the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference teams. So let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks, because they fired Nate McMillan, then we'll get to our best bets here. They're plus 16,000 to win the NBA Finals. And you and I both don't think they're good enough to do that, clearly. That's why they're priced this way. But Nate McMillan getting fired is interesting because it seems like there was a power struggle within that front office and within that organization. The McMillan camp and the Trae Young camp. Now, we don't have any inside information. That's just what was been floated out there, but insiders been leaking a little bit. And it feels like the Trae Young guys won this one. This is a super talented starting five. On paper, their starting five is ridiculously talented. They've now gone through two coaches who couldn't figure it out. And I just don't know what you do if you're the Atlanta Hawks, Tyson.
Well, Trae Young's not uncoachable, right? Like that. For some reason, he escapes that narrative. Which I'm not saying he is uncoachable. It's just like this is the second time now it didn't work. The last time they go out, they get an interim. You guys they love each other. They go all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's like this is a perfect marriage. And then a year and a half later, down the road, right? Nate's got to go. It's him or me. Like John Collins has been on the trade block in perpetuity for 3 years. Yeah. Like this is, as you said, man, it's a talented team. It's the theme of the episode is effort, and they are the lowest of the good teams in the NBA. If you want to call the Hawks good, I think they're closer to good than they are bad. They got to be the lowest on the effort scale on a night in, night out basis. Like on a play to play basis. If it's not an alley oop or an open three, like why would I run to my spot? I don't care.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to watch, especially knowing how talented they are. All right, well that'll do it for a little post futures analysis. Now let's get into our money making time here, Tyson. We haven't done this in a bit, so it's now it's hard to bet the NBA on a night to night basis, especially giving out a pick a day in advance, just because we're not really sure exactly who's going to play and who's not. But coming out of the All-Star break, we assume that people are going to play, especially because they've had some time off. So let's get into it. Money making time. I'm going to start in the college hardcourt here, Tyson. And here is going to be my first play as I find it in the bet slip. Oh, early play Thursday at noon Eastern. I got North Dakota at home, money line over Western Illinois. That's going to be at minus 154 here on FanDuel Sportsbook. Ken Palm has them winning by, I think the early start time benefits the home team. And let's be honest, let's get a little juice going early here at noon. Come on, baby, it's starting to feel like March Madness. So I'm going to take North Dakota home favorite here to win here at noon.
And if you're sitting there and you're like, how has Brad paid attention to North Dakota basketball this year? He's what are you 540, something like that in the chalkboard as far as plays so far in the college basketball season. So he's been all over. He's seen everybody play probably twice to this point in the season, like every single team. I have a simple one for college basketball, and I'm not going to get into games. I think Texas is going to win the national championship. I think Texas at plus 2,100 right now. The way they're meshing, I just think that this team's probably going to win the Big 12 tournament or at least play Kansas very closely. And then all of a sudden they're sitting on the one line and we're at 850. And obviously if that blows up in my face, I'll lose a ton of value here. But I really believe in the way that they're starting to play. And they just looked dominant last night against Iowa State, and I know Iowa State's a bad road team, but when Iowa State punched them back, all of a sudden it was just another, like, we're here. Like, this is who we are now. I really like Texas.
My second pick, and I have three in college basketball. I'm going to go Florida Atlantic minus 18.5, and I know it's a huge number. Ken Pomeroy, he's got them winning by 22 points on his simulation. But FAU is awesome. Like if they didn't win their conference, I truly believe that they would get an at-large bid. Like they've been great. They have a great profile. They compete with teams outside their conference in the non-con. And UTSA is ranked like 300th in the nation by all metrics. They're not a good team. Now they have to go into Florida Atlantic. It's a long road trip. I like Florida Atlantic to crush UTSA. I'm laying the points here minus 18.5.
I think everybody at home needs to tease this to 15 because you've been getting these Florida schools, dude. Like you've been getting screwed.
Yeah, it's been a rough one. I'll give up my last college basketball pick here, Tyson, before we move to the NBA picks. Oral Roberts minus 13.5. I love this Oral Roberts team last year, and it's unfortunate that Kyle O'Banner left and he went to Texas Tech because that O'Banner A-Smith team from 2 years ago, when they beat Ohio State in the first round, that was sick. And of course, my boy Ian Eagle was calling the game, so it just sounded even cooler.
The best in the world.
Oh, he's the best. Ken Palm has them winning by 14. Now they are on the road at South Dakota, but South Dakota is not a good team. They play extremely slow. Oral Roberts speeds you up. Like they're going to try to turn them over, and A-Smith has absolutely taken the game over in conference play. So I like Oral Roberts laying the money. Now, if you're a little scared by that, I'd look the first half. If you're at something a little shorter, they're very good in the first half. Sometimes they get out to too big of a leads and they give up the back door. So if you don't want to lay this full game, I'd look at the half, but I like Oral Roberts to dominate this game. I'm going to lay 13.5 here with Oral Bob. What do you like in the NBA, Tyson?
I think tomorrow, one of the plays that I'm pretty intrigued in is Klay Thompson under 24.5 points. Let me find that. That's minus 111 right now. you're going to see that and you're going to go, well, Steph Curry's not playing. It's got to be Klay Thompson. They also play Friday. I think Curry's going to try to limit his minutes. Klay Thompson is averaging like 18 points a game this season. He's not going to reliably create his own shot at this stage. I think, could he come out and hit 10 threes Klay Thompson style? Maybe. But on the first night of a back-to-back without your star in games that you kind of need to roll some momentum in before Steph comes back, I just don't see Klay hitting this number.
That's interesting. I might join you on that. That's a good thought. And you're playing the Lakers too. The Lakers like to get up for those games, especially in Staples, or I guess what is it now, Crypto.com or something like that.
Yeah, is that still allowed?
I don't know. It's weird. My pick: Cleveland Cavaliers money line against the Nuggets. Now the Cavs are home. I think their size can bother Jokic. I'm going to get on this early. I think this actually might close a little bit higher than this, so I'm gonna take this anything under -150. It's simple for me. I think the Cavs have better guards. I think both Garland and Mitchell are better players right now than Jamal Murray. And people are like, oh geez, excuse me. People are like, what do you mean? They remember Jamal Murray from. Oh my God, I'm dying.
Sounds like a concert.
Oh, I'm choking. Holy smokes. They remember Jamal Murray from the bubble, and they're like, oh, Jamal Murray this, Jamal Murray that. Darius Garland is awesome. We know what Donovan Mitchell is. So I'm gonna take Cleveland Cavaliers money line at home.
I like that. I'm gonna go with the Kings -5 tomorrow against the Blazers as my second pick. That's -110 right now. Anthony Simons, Nurkic, neither one of them are going to play. They're 5-8 this year without Nurkic. Malik Monk's back for the Kings, and the Blazers are 2-9 against the spread in their last 11. And this isn't a big enough number to scare me towards a money line situation. The Kings are better. The Blazers are missing their second best scorer and their anchor in the middle. Damian Lillard and Sharp probably aren't good enough to beat De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis and those guys right now. And eventually people are going to have to start realizing that like De'Aaron Fox is in that tier.
Yeah.
Like however good you think like the second tier of point guards are after kind of the established top guys, like De'Aaron Fox is at the top of that.
And then my last pick in the NBA for now, Thunder +2. I like this one a lot. Thunder are a better team than the Jazz. I know the Jazz have a better record. I think the Thunder are going to try to make a push for the playoffs, which sounds crazy because we're just so used to them. We're just so used to them choking or tanking and just be like, nah, I'm not interested in playing. Gilgeous-Alexander is legit. This team fits around him extremely well. And I like their coach, man. A good young coach who's kind of like meshing this team together. And I think Sam Presti understands, hey, at some point it's cool to have draft picks and it's cool to get all this talent. You have to learn how to win.
You have to.
Like at some point, you got to flip
It's so stupid. It's like they've been tanking for so long and racking up these picks. And it's like you have a chance to make the playoffs with a bunch of guys who haven't had to learn to win. Basically, like Shea was there, Dort was there when they made the playoffs with Chris Paul, but they didn't get it done against that Rockets and a Rockets team in a very winnable series for the Thunder. And like if they keep going, like this is how Monte Ellis happened. Like you go back through and it's like you can name all these really, really good young players that never had to learn how to win. And then when winning time happened, they didn't know what to do. And then everyone's like, this guy sucks. When in reality, it's the organization doing them a disservice.
Do you have another one, or are you tapped out?
I'm tapped out, man. I gotta. Most everybody else, I'm just like either not interested in like watching the entirety of their basketball game, or I have to see how they're gonna play.
Yeah, that's how I feel right now too. I think there's some angles. I mean, I'll say this: if the Magic get to -6, I'm gonna play them against the Pistons. I think the Magic are gonna try to make the play in. Like, there's no point in them tanking. They have their guy Banchero. They have their young pieces. The Pistons would like to tank. Like they want to add somebody around Cunningham and Ivy. Like they want
James Wiseman wasn't it enough?
I guess not. I guess not.
How come he's not like a bigger bust in people's minds? James Wiseman.
Because he has like 2 rings or something.
Yeah, I mean,
even though he like had like impact one of the playoff series, maybe.
Melvin Gordon won a ring this year in the NFL too.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. We're gonna add some plays. We got our golf picks out in our chalkboard right now. Tyson, tell them where to find it.
They're in the Chalkboard app. You can download in the App Store or Google Play. It's basically just like Discord. Brad and I are throwing picks down, NBA, NHL, NCAA basketball, football, the NFL. And I know that we're not betting the NFL right now, but draft season's coming. Anthony Richardson closed like 400 points today on going to 101, which to me is insane. But the combine is a couple weeks away, and we're going to know a lot more about these guys. So stay tuned for that. And obviously, you mentioned the PGA Tour, but I cannot stress enough how much fun it is to have a 3-leg parlay of guys to finish in the top 20, and you're sitting pretty until Sunday afternoon. Like there's nothing better than that, man. I think that's like my favorite thing to do. All those are in there. We're throwing them down. We're throwing down parlays, singles, props, pretty much anything you can think of. And the group name is the Round Table.
In the meantime, like, subscribe, and share the show. Follow us on our socials, Instagrams @_the roundtable pod _ Our TikTok is the same, and send us a tweet over @TRT_pod. We will be back next week. We got a lot more basketball to discuss. We got some football breakdowns. We're going to start soon. Houston Texans? No. Chicago Bears? They're the 1 seed or the number 1 overall pick. Thank you, Lovie Smith. Again, we love you here. We'll start our breakdowns starting pretty soon about what we think these teams could do and should do. So we will speak to you all then. Peace.